When we petitioned our local governments to find within themselves the testicular fortitude to stand up for our rights, their media called us mischief makers with an agenda. When our movement started to gain traction, eventually becoming a wave to sweep across the state, gaining support from the vast majority of communities within this state, they responded with threats, telling us that we will bow before their unconstitutional laws or be met with force. They have stated that they are deeply disturbed by the fact that we would deign to stand up for our freedoms, and they are indeed disturbed, although this trait of theirs predates these recent events. In the days prior to the massive Lobby Day rally, they emphasized fringe activities of random neo-Nazis, attempting to imply some form of association. And now, once we have rallied peacefully in the defense of liberty, they call our peaceful protest terrorism, our nonviolence violent. They point to the men and women of our movement exercising their rights, bearing arms, and cry out, howling that they are intimidated. They are so weak and insipid that they actually believe their own cowardice to be an argument. Lust for power over others is born out of cowardice. There is no moral, principled argument that can be brought to bear in favor of initiating force against peaceful, non-violent actors. There is only the craven desire for control, the controllers driven by the fear that someone, somewhere, may actually make choices that are counter to the collective will of their supposed betters. This much can be laid bare for all with the clarity to see. When pressed, those driven by this perverse thirst always provide some variant of one of two justifications: that the initiation of force against people who have harmed none is either necessary in order to achieve some imagined greater good, or that those against whom the force is being leveled are morally deserving of coercion, that they are either too stupid or too evil to be allowed to govern themselves. They are intimidated by the vigorous display of our liberties, precisely because it is liberty itself that they fear. Just as self-governance is anathema to those who would seek to govern others, so too is the very concept of an armed citizenry, as armed men and women prepared to defend themselves against any who would impose their whims upon them, are formidable to the goals of those whose ambition is to control others. You cannot control those who have the will to fight, especially if they are equipped to resist you. We stood together to represent a promise that if our new government chooses to enact any laws that are geared towards violating our constitutional rights, then they will be met with resistance. That there are still Americans left in this country who value our freedoms, and if legal means of petitioning our government fails, then we will find ourselves at a crossroads of history, where we can either choose to stand and fight for our liberties, as our forefathers did, or simply accept and endure the perpetual erosion of our liberties. It is my hope that such a day will never arrive. If fortune smiles upon us, these unconstitutional and unreasonable restrictions of our liberties will be struck down in court when challenged. If we are even more fortunate, hopefully this new government will be removed in 2 years. But until then, we must act. We must continue to lobby our representatives. We must continue to do whatever is in our power to frustrate the efforts of these control freaks who view us with such bigotry, contempt, and disdain that they would attempt to reduce us to nothing more than serfs.